On September 3rd, 2022, I uploaded the video Conlang Showcase Britannian to the Imagination Productions YouTube channel, which you are currently watching. That video was admittedly rushed, so I wouldn't be working on it during the school year, and it contained a few careless errors. The main reason I'm making this video, plain and simple, is that I wasn't satisfied with my first attempt at creating Britannian. I don't remember exactly when I first got the idea for Britannian, but I'm pretty sure it was either late 2020 or early 2021. I was already looking into how Latin became the Romance languages in an attempt to better understand Spanish, and I was even toying with the idea of making my own Romance conlang, but I wasn't sure what direction to take it yet. The main reason I make a posteriori conlangs, that is, constructed languages derived from another pre-existing language, is because languages are a product of their history. To me, making a conlang from scratch doesn't just mean creating a phonology, grammar, and lexicon. It means creating an entire world for that language to exist in, and a history to explain why it is the way it is. For me, conlanging is a subset of world building, which is fun, but it's also a lot of work. Instead, I've decided that what works best for me, at least for right now, is to take languages from the real world and pass them through an alternate history to see how they come out on the other side. I chose British Vulgar Latin first because 1. Like I said, I was already studying the history of the Romance languages y también soy estudiante de español. 2. At the same time, I was also studying the history of my native language, English, and the historical context that created it in all its modern-day diversity. And lastly, because of a video by Native Lang about African Romance, which got me curious about the regions of Europe and North Africa where Latin was spoken during the days of the Roman Empire, but today lack a homegrown Romance language, including Africa, Dalmatia, and of course, Britannia. Besides, I figured I should probably start with languages I'm more familiar with, like English and the Romance languages, before trying out a more advanced idea, like what if Andalusi Arabic survived into the modern day, or what if China set up Mandarin-speaking colonies in the Americas? The original idea for Britannian was to try and recreate modern English using a base of Vulgar Latin. The idea being that since English is fundamentally a Germanic language, the best I could possibly do was create a unique sounding Romance language that had many features in common with English. Eventually, I settled on a few basic criteria. 1. Britannian should draw most of its early sound changes from the history of French, while later sound changes will primarily come from the history of English. 2. Britannian should be most similar to the Gallo-Romance languages, especially the Langue d'Oil of northern France, and especially those from the Zone Francique, the Frankish zone, including Norman, Picard, and Walloon. 3. The grammar and syntax of Britannian should only draw from English when at least one Romance language has the same feature, or when that feature is the direct result of sound changes in the language's history. Otherwise, use French as a base. Basically, take the closest dialects on the Romance dialect continuum and change them to fit the sociolinguistic history of England. Of course, as a constructed language, every feature of Britannian ultimately comes down to personal choice on part of the conlanger. With that in mind, let's take a look at some of the changes I've made to Britannian since uploading that first video. Latin H was lost very early on in the history of Vulgar Latin. Old French gained a new H through loanwords from Frankish, but it was lost again in the transition to modern Parisian French. However, after making the original Britannian video, I learned that the Channel Island dialects of Norman have actually managed to preserve the glottal fricative h into the modern day. Knowing that, I feel a lot more comfortable including it in modern Britannian. Now what about dental fricatives? Someone pointed out in the comments section of the original video that, much like the glottal fricative, dental fricatives are somewhat of an aerial feature in the British Isles. Welsh has them, Cornish has them, English has them, heck, even Gerrier, the Norman dialect of Jersey Island, created a new the from R between vowels, so why were there no dental fricatives in Britannian? The short answer is, because I don't want to. Look, I'm not a fan of dental fricatives, okay? But since all of the Celtic and Germanic languages influencing Britannian have them, and they're pretty common in this part of the British Isles, let's see what we can cook up. In Catalan, Latin D between vowels sometimes survived as w, while in Occitan it was preserved by merging with z from Latin S between vowels. I guess this is technically justification to keep Latin D in certain contexts after a vowel as a voiced dental fricative the, just like what happened in Welsh, where the soft mutation of D is the, which has remained into the modern day. In the original video, I said that most verbs only had one conjugation, but I never explained how I got there. In Old English, your average verb had 4 inflections in the present tense, one for the first person singular, one for the second person singular, one for the third person singular, and one for all plural subjects. When the Anglo-Saxons learned British Vulgar Latin, they started using the third person plural endings for all plural subjects. Then, when the second person plural vos displaces singular tu, it takes its conjugations with it, just like what happened with you and thou in English. The result is a system where there are 2 present tense conjugations of a verb, one with no ending for the first person singular and third person singular, and one marked with an unstressed un for all other subjects. Now in French, the third person plural ending is silent, because the unstressed vowel was nasalized, the nasal consonant lost, and then the unstressed vowel was lost. However, Britannian doesn't have nasalization anywhere else, so it wouldn't make much sense for this verb ending to be lost, so 2 conjugations it is. Juaim, elaim, vos amen, nos amen, els amen. The original video didn't include contractions, because they're mostly optional in English, and the Romance language I'm most familiar with, Spanish, only has like 2. However, considering how many mandatory contractions there are in French, Catalan, Portuguese, and Italian, and how common they are in English, it doesn't really make sense for Britannian not to have contractions. So here we go. Let's start with the obvious. Whenever the prepositions a or de are followed by a definite article le or lus, they become al, als, del, and dels. The definite article le, the preposition de, the interrogative qui, and the first person singular pronoun ju are all contracted before a word that begins with a vowel. So, j'aime l'homme qu'est d'Amérique for I love the man who is from America. The negative particle na also contracts before a vowel. So, je n'aime pas l'homme qu'est d'Amérique for I don't love the man who is from America. Although it's technically not a change, while making this video I realized I never actually translated my example sentence from the beginning of the first video, so I guess now would be as good a time as any to do that. Nos envide le quai ne saute sobre le fence. Finally, the announcement you really came here for, there's a Britannian info page now. Don't get too excited, it's just a Google Doc. There are sections to help you navigate if there's one feature in particular you're more interested in, vocabulary lists, as well as my general philosophy on loanwords in Britannian, and a couple translated texts at the end. I take it from the comment section on the first video that a lot of people really liked the idea of Britannian, but just wish there was more to it, maybe an official blog or a Discord server. For me, Britannian was just the beginning of a much longer conlanging journey. My first conlang was Smartalk, which is basically just a fancy way of speaking English. My second, Britannian, took a language family I'm already very familiar with and added the history of English onto it. My next conlang will be a Germanic language, just like English, but more closely related to some languages I'm not super familiar with. Who knows, maybe one day I'll actually be able to execute one of the more complicated ideas I mentioned earlier, or even make an a priori conlang with an imaginary world to go with it. With that being said, I don't plan on doing a whole lot with Britannian going on into the future. I might make periodic updates to the info page, but really, I think it's time I move on to some other projects I have been wanting to do. If you're really passionate about Britannian, I encourage you to start your own online communities, and I can even help share links, but after this video, I'm ready to move on. This language is now in your hands. And as always, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, I love you all, like, subscribe, comment, share algorithm, and stay tuned for more imagination productions.